Okay, so now we're on generics, which is a powerful way to define your types. You can pass anything to them and it handles most cases. So if we read the documentation, it says generics provide variables to types. A common example is an array. An array without generics could contain anything. An array with generic can describe the values that it contains. So we have a few types in here, essentially a string array, which is an array of strings, a number array, and an object with name array. So you can declare your own types that use generics, but essentially it's saying that let's pretend that we have a variable called backpack, and then this variable has a type or interface of backpack, and we're passing in the string. So the interface is here. Now you can see here it says type, type, and type. Now what we essentially are doing is TypeScript is saying that whatever the value is from backpack when we invoke it and pass it in here is what we expect. So in our case, we're passing in string, which then would trickle down into the interface. So you would imagine it as backpack is the string. The string then gets passed down in the tree down to add and get. So the object for add is a string, and the get method is going to return a string as well. So essentially that's what it is. Now, if we go into our code and let's take a look at an example. So I'm going to create a new file called generics. And essentially, generics are a way to make your component or function or your variable work with any type of data that we pass into it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a function, and this function is going to be called log data. So now log data takes in some data, and I'm going to give it as data type of string for now, but essentially this will return the data, and then all we need to do is invoke the function. So log data of hello world. So now if I save, if we hover over it, you can see log data takes in data of string and it returns the string. But what we want to do is we want to be able to pass in log data of 123. And we also want to be able to pass in log data of true. As you can see, there are errors showing in here. So argument of type number is not assignable to type of string. And then this will be argument boolean is not assignable to parameter of string. So what we want to do first of all is log these out. So I'm going to log the types out. So now you can see they're all receiving data as string, and they're also returning data as string. So what we now need to do is we need to use generics in the method that we seen earlier on the TypeScript docs. Over here, we say that it receives a type, and then that type is being used down the tree in the interface. But in our example, it's a function. We will look at an interface also. So what I want to do is here, before we invoke the parameter or argument, passing it in, we want to put in something called T, which is essentially T stands for type, and I stands for interface, so that is generally the naming convention. So now what will happen is when we pass this into data now, so instead of string, it's going to be T. Now we can see here what has happened to the type is the errors have now gone, but essentially what it is saying is T is the argument that we are passing in. So this is T, and this is T. This then gets passed into the data, which is also T. In our case, is whatever the value is, which is true, and then it returns the data then. So if we look at the first example, which is a string, log data, it's passing in hello world, which is a string. Then we essentially are passing in the hello world string here and essentially getting hello world back out as a string. So generics is saying that this is a string and we want to pass that in. So now you can see this function is not restricted to one data type, and you can hover over it, and the third argument is also a T, which is the return type. So you can also add that in, but TypeScript again infers the type for you, so you don't need to worry about that. Or what you could do is you could do a string and then do some calculation in here using the methods we've done, or just normal JavaScript to return either a string or whatever it may be. So you can convert the values whatever you want to do in the function. So that is fine. But what about if data is an object? So let's change this true value into an object. So this object is going to be name is equal to a string of Imran. So now, as you can see, because we are passing in the generic of T, T and T, which stands for type. What happens here is it says function log data is an object with the name of a string, which is what Imran is. The data is name of a string, and again the return type is name of a string. Again, this will need to be worked on in here, so how you want to log the data is completely up to yourself, but this is how we would use generics. So essentially it's like an input output. We're passing in the input here, it filters the input into here, and then the output is to here. So input, whatever the argument is, and then the return value in here. This would be void if we didn't return anything. So if we did console log of data, again, this would change, and you can see now if we hover over it, it's saying there's an error because this is not correct. If we delete it, TypeScript will fix this and infer it to void, or you can pass it in as void itself. So it's completely up to you how you want to use it. In my opinion, this is a very powerful technique and can be used to any function or interface to receive arguments and type check them and handle them correctly based on what we pass into the arguments. So that is how we would define it for a function. So now what we want to do is define it for a interface. So this interface is going to be called const user, and this user is going to be taking in a name of Imran and an age of 25. So again, what we need to do is give user a type. So let's go ahead and do that now. And the type is going to be user is equal to name of a string and age of a number, like so. And then we just need to pass it into here. And then what I'm going to do is console log the user. What I also want to do is create a new user. So const new user or user2. This will take in a name and an age, but this time the age is going to be 30 and the name is going to be John. And if we close this off, we now have two users in here. And what I also want to do is I want to console log user2 as well. But now we have no errors in the application. What we now need to do is add latitude on both. So this, or location should I say, and then the location for user1 Dhaka, which is a string. So let's go ahead and add the location in here as a string. And the question mark operator here is optional, meaning that this value could be there or it could not be there. So that is quite a handy feature in TypeScript as well when we're defining types. So we can have that in. But what I want to do is make that required. So to make it required, we don't have the question mark in. Now what I need to do is define the type here. So this location type is going to be a coordinate. So I'm just going to put in a few different numbers in here. So this will be a latitude. Now you can see there's an error in here saying that location type number is not assignable to type string, which is correct because we have defined the string type in here. So that's the location. But what it really is it is a number here. So what I quickly want to do is change this to an interface. And now we are going to be using generics to fix this so that this location will be a string and then this location will be a number. So the way to do that is after user, similar to what we did here for T, we want to do an I because this is an interface. So I'm just showing you two ways. So we pass in I into the user type and then essentially we render I in the location. So now we've handled it here, but there is an error on these types here because it's saying generic type user I requires one type argument. So we need to pass in an argument type in here. So the first argument is essentially string, meaning that the location is going to be a string. And now you can see that error has gone. So if we do the same thing again, and this is wrong because this is a number. So let's go ahead and change this to a number. And now you can see we have gotten rid of the errors, and generics is saying that we're passing in the string into the user interface. This I is then being passed into the location in here. So that is generics. What I also want to do is change this so that we have an object, and this object is of lat 23.232. So now to fix this, what you would do is literally copy this. Instead of number, you pass this in, but this is now the exact type in here. So if I save, this is the value being passed into I, and then I is attaching itself to location. This isn't the best value because what will happen is the type, when we change the value, it will show an error. So if we hover over it, it says type 23.22 is not assignable to type 23.232. So to make it make more sense, we need to pass it in as a number. So now you can pass in whatever numbers you want and it will infer the type for us. So now you can see here that we have fixed the types using generics, and that is how you would utilize it in a real world app. Is if we had a user that had certain types on their location, or if this was data, we could just pass it in as a generic, and then you can pass in whatever data in that object inside. And then again, instead of lat being a number, you could do type of lat is equal to number, like so. And then you could do this and paste that in here. And then that way, we could use union types to further extend it. So this could be a number or a string. So now we have leveraged the power of union types and generics, which are both composing types. So as you can see at the top here. So composing types, we are leveraging the power of everything we have learned so far. And now we are creating the type in here, which is a union type. And then you can pass that in here as well. And then you can also declare this. If you wanted to break it down further, you could create a new type. And this type is location, which essentially is lat is equal to lat, like so. And then you pass this location in here. And if you hover over the error, it's saying duplicate identifier of location. So we just want to call this one location type. Now you can see the errors have gone. So this is all quite handy when you're using it in an application, because what you are doing is you are reinforcing the types, you are manipulating your data types and using TypeScript functionality to be able to make your code more readable, and also it helps you stand out in a team when you're working on projects as well. So what we're going to be looking at next is structural type system. So we'll look at that next.